Good evening and welcome to Hardfire. I'm Ronald WIECK, your host for the third segment of our three-part debate on the collapses of the Twin Towers. My guests, as you probably remember from the previous two shows, I have Tony SZAMBOTI in the studio with me. He's a mechanical engineer, and I have Ryan MACKEY on webcam from LA. Ryan is a NASA scientist. Before we get into the topics we have been hammering about, I told Tony that I would tax him with the Osama conundrum. Since we're talking about conspiracies, we have to deal with the question of conspirators. I mean, someone has to be behind this conspiracy. I'm going to read what I wrote and posted, and we're not going to belabor the issue, just a few thoughts. Either Osama's repeated explanations of his role in the attacks of 9/11 are genuine, or he's being impersonated by an exact double, an asset of the impossibly vast conspiracy. If you acknowledge the reality of his videos, your entire movement collapses. You must therefore argue against all evidence that the Osama the world sees isn't real. Now let's pretend you're correct. You aren't, but we'll pretend. In the fall of 2006, Bush and Cheney were staring at a massive defeat that would strip them of much of their power and pave the way for a Democratic takeover of the presidency in 2008. That, in fact, happened. In the face of this looming humiliation, they could have announced that the bogeyman, the non-existent Osama, had at long last been killed. They could have, in other words, snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Curiously, they chose to do nothing and accepted a battering at the polls. Given that neither Bush nor Cheney will ever again run for public office, this was absolutely the last chance to play the Osama card. Well, who will swallow the idea that Bush and Cheney preferred taking this beating that wrecked their second term? What's the solution to the Osama conundrum?
Well, first of all, I don't think that if those behind 9/11 were not 19 hijackers and Osama, and I don't think they're the whole story, and the FBI does not have any hard evidence against bin Laden.
Well, wait a minute. The FBI thinks that bin Laden did.
They don't have anything about 9/11 on his wanted poster. I thought that was odd when I heard it.
The Washington Post story explaining that covers it pretty well.
I didn't read that Washington Post story. You'll have to explain that. But the point is that we do know the FBI has nothing on their wanted poster for Osama bin Laden about the 9/11 attacks. Also, the Osama bin Laden video that was found where he supposedly admitted to it was found like a needle in a haystack in a house in Jalalabad in Afghanistan.
But
I don't know.
Every news outlet in the Middle East accepts these as authentic.
I have no idea whether Osama bin Laden was involved in 9/11 because I haven't seen any evidence of it other than the purported tape of him saying he was. I don't know, Ron. I don't have enough evidence to say
But what I'm
either way.
saying is that if he's not, if this is an actor portraying him, why don't the evildoers just say, "Hey, we killed him. We're not so inept after all. We got the bad guy."
I don't know that any conspiracy, U.S. conspiracy behind 9/11 would have to just involve George Bush and Dick Cheney, or just Republicans either, for that matter.
Now we're getting
because I don't see any Democratic congressmen taking up the issue that they should to reinvestigate the crimes and how those buildings collapsed.
But that's because they think it's preposterous.
No, that's not. They don't have. They think it's preposterous.
I mean, Noam Chomsky hates America.
Noam Chomsky's not an engineer. Noam Chomsky that wouldn't have any idea how to argue whether the buildings came down or not. So he's irrelevant to the conversation. I think he's completely irrelevant. You have to get into the engineering, and I haven't seen real proof that those buildings came down. And there is a dilemma here. Ryan admits there's no jolt. Building 7 came down in free fall for 100 feet or 8 stories. That's pretty hard to do without something removing the strength of those columns unnaturally. So we have an engineering dilemma that we have to solve. And anybody that doesn't want to look into that is being disingenuous in some way. And I think we need to have a rational, civilized debate about this, recognizing real problems. And you know what? If there is a natural, innocent solution, so be it. We don't have that yet.
I thank you for a game effort, and I want to get back to the physics. I just want to leave the viewers with this question in mind. Osama's videos are real. There is no truth movement. If they're not real, then obviously Bush and Cheney missed a big opportunity to spare themselves a massive, massive, crippling defeat. Ryan, I don't want to continue with this particular thread. Let's go right back to the physics, the jolt. Should we have expected to see a jolt?
Sure. Yeah, once again, thank you for having me back.
Our pleasure.
Tony asked a good question. He says, are there some engineering answers to these questions? Why did World Trade Center 1 see no jolt? Why did World Trade Center 7's perimeter fall, practically free fall for some period? And there are answers for these. There are answers that don't involve explosives, that don't involve nanothermite or anything like that. I put together a number of slides that describe this. I'd like to walk through that briefly. Yeah, if you could bring up the second one. I have a disclaimer I like to run. I don't like disclaimers, but every time I appear, there's always some kid who says the government is paying you to do this, and you're at the beck and call of your masters. It's not true. I don't work on this for a living. Everything you see here is completely on my own time. If you want to contact me by email, go ahead and do that. So I'm not trying to argue from the strength of the job I do. I have experience with engineering issues, but I'm doing this completely on my own. So with that out of the way, if you can go ahead to my slide number 3. I've got two pictures here, and this is relevant to understanding why we don't see a jolt. The picture on the left is a picture of what the floor systems look like as they're being installed. Now, on top of this, there's going to be a few inches of concrete poured, but you can see the kind of connections we're dealing with, and you can see how relatively lightweight these are. You have to understand the World Trade Center was a unique structure because it was efficient. It was designed to carry a lot of weight without itself being particularly massive. And this works as long as everything stays in true, but it doesn't give you that much resilience once you start getting off nominal. The second picture, the one on the right, is also taken from the